the Winnipeg Jets are a curious team because they're pretty good. They're probably good enough to make the playoffs. I'm not sure if they're good enough to win a Stanley Cup, but the entire season, the one big question that's going to be going on for the Jets is how do they deal with Scheifele and Hellebuyck and their expiring contracts?
Expiring contracts. You know, at the end of last season, there was a lot of talk about what was going to happen. Some significant moves. Pierre-Luc Dubois traded, Blake Wheeler bought out. And now you're looking at Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuyck. Mike, I think the key term you just used there, good enough to make the playoffs, not good enough to win a Stanley Cup or to be considered serious contenders. So where does that put you? That puts you into that spot where, you don't want to think about not being in the playoffs, but if your goal is to compete for Stanley Cups, they're not there at this point in time with Scheifele and with Hellebuyck. So what do you have to do to put yourself there? The Minnesota Wild were making the playoffs every year, and they were never a contender. They had to change how their team was constructed, and they had to make some difficult decisions. That's where the Winnipeg Jets find themselves. And when we look at Scheifele and Connor Hellebuyck, they're going to have to maximize a return on those guys. Because even with them, even signed to long-term contracts, I don't think it changes the calculus for the Winnipeg Jets as Stanley Cup contenders.
And even talking about this with you, you understand logically, yes, that's what you have to do, but you can also appreciate how difficult the decision this could be if they're in the playoffs or around the playoffs to say, you know what, for the future, for the long term, to become a Stanley Cup contender, not just a playoff contender, we're going to have to trade pieces off our team that are helping us perhaps make the playoffs, earn the revenue that a playoff gate might bring, all those kind of things. But you just have to be honest with yourself. And you're exactly right. With these guys on their team who are both good players, Scheifele coming off a career high in goals, Hellebuyck one of the best goals in the league year over year, they're still not really a contender, so they're going to have to try to find a way to move them. And even on the practical nature, I mean, they're both in their 30s. They're going to be 31 when their new contracts start. Do you want to sign guys to 8-year deals from 31 to 39? No matter how good they are, no matter how good they've been for your franchise, probably not. So it puts Kevin Cheveldayoff, who's patient, and he doesn't rush into anything, in a bit of a tough spot, knowing that he probably has to deal with these two guys at some point this year.
One thing about Kevin, and patient he is, but he's also very smart. And they got a lot of good young players currently on their team and in the system, which is encouraging for the Winnipeg Jets. But Kevin showed this past summer that he could make a really good deal. He did that with Pierre-Luc Dubois. Individually, Iafallo, Kupari, and Velarde, individually they're not as good as Pierre-Luc Dubois, but the three of them make their team better. And if Kevin takes that same approach with Connor Hellebuyck and Mark Scheifele, I don't have any reason to doubt with their young group of players that are there now, signed long-term, and some of the players in the pipeline, that they can put themselves in a really good position to become exactly what they want to be, a Stanley Cup contender.
So that's going to be the reality for them all year long. They'll be hovering over their shoulders. At some point, these guys will likely be dealt. And the other part of being a Winnipeg Jet is their organization is best served by acquiring players that they can control for a long time. Like Scheifele and like Hellebuyck, homegrown guys, whether it's by trade or by free agency, we bring them in, we keep them for a long time, we grow together and become a Stanley Cup contender. They're going to have to do that one more time for these two long-standing stars who likely shouldn't finish the season in Winnipeg.